Pac-Man's a strange one, isn't it? Because he's had consistently dreadful games through the years. Apart from Championship Deluxe, that was all right. But he's actually been far worse than, say, Sonic, who's gotten a lot more grief. So you can only assume that Pac-Man must have some dirt on someone. It made really what should be boring games fun, didn't it? Because it was just blocks falling, which the games were much better than that, but somehow they got away with it. They got away with it and convinced people that puzzles were better than action games. I don't know how they did it, but yeah, it's all right. I don't think Elite's been influential enough for my liking. Like, back in the 80s, they managed to fit 8 galaxies on a single floppy disk with loads of room left. Whereas these days, I live out in the country, so the broadband's not great. If they update a game now, it's like 3-4 gig. I've got to leave my console on overnight to download that. If they had the modern attitude to efficient coding back then that they've got now, we'd have run out of plastic for floppy disks. Well, it was one of the first 4-player arcade machines, wasn't it? So that was a big deal. I guess a lot of people are going to talk about the fantasy elements, but for me, the most important thing about Gauntlet is it established 4-player gaming, which gave me arcade games like the Simpsons arcade game and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which for some reason aren't on your list of the most influential games, which is ridiculous. It was 2-player run and gun, wasn't it? So it wasn't taking it in terms it was simultaneously you could play it. You know, that was the most fun you could have at Butlins in Skegness. As an 8-year-old, obviously, if you were a single uncle in his 20s who had a predilection for red coats, you could clean up. I never understood the appeal of side-scrolling shooters. Couldn't care less. And R-Type was really hard. No, thank you. This I can get on board with. Don't care about the side-scrolling shooters, care a lot about this. As someone who's known for being incredibly boring, it should come as no surprise that the idea of playing a game where you look at the minutiae of regional zoning in town planning was right up my street. For me, it was the first game to really use humour successfully, because a lot of games have tried it before, but it never really worked. Plus, it's got a rubber chicken with a pulley in the middle. Who doesn't want that? Yeah, I mean, it's another Mario game, so you're probably going to assume that I'm going to bang on about how great it is, but actually, it's not aged very well. If you go back and play it today, it's really brutal because it doesn't control in the way that we've become accustomed to games handling since in that sort of genre. But obviously, it spawned not only all the Mario Kart games, which is a great franchise, but karting as a sub-genre of driving games. Like Mario Kart 8 still, it is one of the best ones ever. The original one's dreadful. Just don't work. Just bouncing off rocks and falling down holes. Waste of time.
Reinforcements have arrived.
I never really got into real-time strategy games. I was more into turn-based stuff like Civilization, which is a shame because obviously these days you've got things like Dota, League of Legends. They're massive. They're the only way to make any real money in gaming, and I'm dreadful at them.
Dear Mario, please come to the castle. I have baked a cake for you. Yours truly, Princess Toadstool. Peach.
I mean, firstly, it's a great game. It's absolutely incredible. It still stands up today, but rather than talk about the gameplay or the 3D world and those things, the thing that a lot of people forget about that game is that it nailed dynamic cameras in a 3D environment. There was a lot of games in the early years of the N64 and the PlayStation where the camera was more of a nuisance than a help, but Super Mario 64 nailed that straight off the bat. I don't know. I never got into them. No, I didn't. I tried to play 4, but I hadn't got a clue what was going on. I know a lot of people really loved them, but I think the main legacy is Kojima's got a lot to answer for in terms of the length of modern cutscenes. The Order 1886 is basically his fault. These days with Pokemon, you can go on a web forum and agree to log in at the same time as someone you met online and just swap them. Like back in the day, you used to have to get your Game Boy Link cable, and if you heard somebody at school that had got a Pokemon you hadn't, you'd have to walk to their house and plug in, swap it, and walk back. Pokemon back then probably did far more for childhood obesity than Wii Fit ever did. I don't want to play a game where I have to manage and monitor a pretend person's bladder levels. If you do, get help. It's another one of those games that really drew a line in the sand between Sony and Nintendo. You know, talk about Doom defining first and third person shooters, but GTA 3 defined that open world action adventure genre. It's influenced every game that's come since it. Ubisoft definitely owe Rockstar a pint. For me, Metroid Prime is a great example of how good Nintendo could be at this sort of thing if they bother to develop these sorts of titles. I'm someone who loves cute little green dinosaurs and Captain Toad tracking his treasure, but that was a really exciting title, Metroid Prime, when it landed. We've not had that. We've not had an F-Zero in years, and everybody wants that, a proper racing game with Nintendo. And Metroid Prime's now been relegated to the 3DS. Sometimes it's almost as if Nintendo hate making money. Yeah, Resident Evil 4 was my trump card. Like, whenever anybody told me that the GameCube was rubbish, I could just put that on, and that'd shut them up. It didn't stop me getting bullied, but it certainly deferred it. For me, Modern Warfare wasn't just the turning point in that series, it was the turning point where games started to be properly comparable to movies. Not just in terms of production values, but in terms of the launches, the marketing, and the perception of non-gamers of what those things were. You know, mates who'd only ever really played FIFA and things like that started to get pulled back into gaming. It completely changed the landscape of what gaming was to non-gamers. With Mass Effect, it's another one of those series that I can't let myself go near. Like before E3, I thought maybe they were going to bring out a remastered version of the original trilogy for PS4. Obviously, that would have been a lot of work, and thankfully they didn't, because if they had, I'd have probably given it a go. But you know, I don't have 300 hours to pretend to be a spaceman. I've got a garden needs turfing. I only recently realised, as someone who's always been Nintendo since I was a kid, Minecraft's the title that's made me pick a different team. Actually, for the live show that I do, we've got the Oculus Rift, we use that in the show, and we've got Minecraft for it, but I won't let myself play it, because I think if I'm allowed to live in Minecraft as a virtual reality world, you know, I'm going to die in virtual reality, but in real life, just because I'll just starve, because I'll be too busy building a pretend castle to live in.